Despite some stories to the contrary, there is nothing incongruent about BYU's mission and BYU athletics paying its players via NIL to compete at the highest stages of college athletics.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider as your host here on this podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Coming up on today's show, we're going to talk about some stories in the Salt Lake Tribune, one in particular that has drawn the ire of Cougar Nation, and if it actually holds any water, I don't think it does, but we'll get into that. Then we're going to talk about Drake Toll's projections for the season ahead for the Big 12, and Cougar fans, you may love him already, but you love him even more because he's got BYU going pretty darn far this year, all things considered. And then we'll finish up today's show talking about the latest when it comes to the injury reports with the Big 12 and the new games, because gamesmanship is always the rage in college football, and the new games have been created by the mandate that injury reports are now part of college football, at least at the Power 4 level. All right, so let's dive right in on today's show. And if you did not see it in the Salt Lake Tribune yesterday, Kevin Reynolds, BYU beat writer for the Tribune, wrote a story questioning BYU's spot essentially in the college sports universe. The headline, BYU sports versus LDS church leader. Can faith and big money athletics coexist in Provo? ? Yeah, they can. Yes, they do. And yes, they will. Now, the bigger point is it drew a lot of ire from Cougar fans because you look at the situation that BYU is in, and Kevin is writing it from the premise that BYU has always espoused to be different, I guess is the best way to put it, when it comes to college athletics. Yes, they want to compete at the highest level. Yes, they want to have national fame and notoriety if it comes to that. They want to be a nationally renowned program. But essentially, the premise of this story is that BYU should do it without spending money, ? That's where this thing gets off the rails, in my opinion. And case in point in all of this is the fact that Kevin made Tanner Wall the focal point of this story. Here's the deal. BYU is and will be paying a number of athletes some pretty high dollar figures to play for Brigham Young University, none bigger than AJ DeBonsa, who they quote in the story. They say $4.5 million. They said Ryder Lyons didn't get $3 million from BYU before he enrolls at the university, before he didn't go on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're spending a lot of money on some of these high-profile athletes. But here's the deal. If you know the backstory of Tanner Wall, why in the world is a former walk-on who has played literally without a scholarship for multiple years during his time at BYU, all the while becoming an absolute mainstay in BYU's defense? Why, oh why, would you pick Tanner Wall as the focal point of your story? Yes, Tanner is a great coach. Yes, Tanner is a great leader with this BYU football program. But man, is he the wrong subject to pick on in this topic. And trust me, I have seen some posts from his family members. They're not happy. The bigger point beyond that is that BYU obviously wants to compete on a national level. The biggest thing is they're quoting people in this story, some guy who covers the LDS Church for Colorado State Pueblo. I learned for the first time, I think, ever in my entire life that there's a Colorado State University Pueblo campus in Pueblo, Colorado. Things you learn every single day. They also quote one BYU fan who says it makes him have a side eye kind of looking at BYU and the money they're spending to compete on a national level. Here's the deal. BYU spent years, in fact, 12 years as an independent after decades before that, trying to get to where they're at today, and that is competing at the Power 4 level. They have aspired for literally decades to be competing among the nation's elite. When they won a national title in 1984, I know that it draws ire from other fan bases when BYU references that national title, but when they won that national title, the rules were rewritten by the powers that be in college football that essentially said that will never be happening again in this sport. And it took BYU almost 40 years to get back into a spot where they could actually challenge for a national title once again. Yeah, that door was open to a degree in terms of a chance to play for a national title in those years between the national title and entering the Big 12 conference. But let's be honest. For all intents and purposes, that door was slammed shut in BYU's face, and there was 0% chance they were ever going to win a national title with the format the way it is. BYU fought, scratched, clawed, begged, did whatever they could to get into the Big 12 conference. And you think now you're going to question the BYU's paying athletes top dollar? Breaking news to the Salt Lake Tribune and Kevin Reynolds, which, by the way, I will also add this. I actually like Kevin Reynolds a lot. I mean, he and I get along very, very well. I've had multiple conversations with him in talking just all things life, sports, and in between. And I get along with him by and large. But the breaking news I should pass along to him is BYU's playing within the rules of the game. They're not breaking rules here. This is like no gotcha journalism. This is not trying to get BYU in trouble, because the simple fact of life is they're not in trouble. They're literally playing by the same rules that literally everybody else in college football, college basketball, and college athletics at the Power 4 level is competing by. I just don't get the premise of this story. And once again, trying to twist the words of Clark Gilbert, obviously the church education, the commissioner of education for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and saying that BYU will not ever won't be the top bidder. They're not going to be in a pay for play scenario. That's not BYU's style. And here's the deal. Kalani Sitake, Kevin Young, we had Kevin Young on my radio program, DJ and PK, yesterday on the KSL Sports Zone. And if you go and listen to him talk about how the honor code and how BYU's mission influences how he goes about recruiting, it's absolutely a masterclass in how to answer that question when actually asked it by recruits' parents or guardians or whoever might be the decision maker for these individual players. He laid it out that the honor code is what BYU is all about. Kalani Sitake has been very, very straightforward that BYU, yeah, they'll make sure you're taken care of with NIL. But if you're coming to BYU simply for a paycheck, it's not a university for you. It's a church-affiliated institution. Yes, it is, quote, different, unquote. But the bigger point to be had here is BYU, yes, they want to stand apart from the crowd in certain circumstances. But at the same time, if they want to truly compete at this level, because the way I read this story is that BYU should just go back to the old ways and essentially be begging players, pleading for them to come to BYU and say, hey, don't accept a single dime from us outside of the scholarship money we're offering you, and go out there, put your body on the line and compete. And hopefully we can win a national title with just, pure guts and glory. That ain't it. And I don't get what the point of this is. And once again, to have Tanner Wall being quoted in this is kind of the focal point of this. There could not be a person more diametrically opposed as to what Kevin Reynolds is arguing here and what Tanner Wall stands for. Tanner came to BYU because he wanted to be at Brigham Young University. He spurned other scholarship opportunities to play at BYU for free. He did not come for a paycheck. He did not come because BYU begged him and paid him a big fat lump sum of money to show up in Provo, Utah. He has bled, sweat, and put on everything he could for this university. And this is the guy you're going to pick to quote in this story. It doesn't, once again, I said in the open of today's show, there is nothing incongruent about BYU's mission as a university and NIL payments coming, by the way, not from the university itself. These NIL payments have been coming from boosters who are BYU alumni or friends of the university who want to foot the bill for this. There's nothing incongruent about that. BYU is playing by the rules of the game. And if you can't get over that fact, man, might be time to look at something different and do something different, because it doesn't make sense that YU would be questioning BYU playing and competing among their peers at the top levels of college football, college basketball, and college athletics in general. All right, I'll get off my soapbox. Well, coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit about Drake Toll, his projections for the Big 12 this season. And Cougar fans, if you did not see it already, he's got you finishing pretty darn high. And I don't think it's a bad thing to have him projecting BYU where they're at. And we'll dig into that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends back with us, our friends over at Prize Picks, a daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football is not far behind. Whether you have your eye on a big-name quarterback or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in on the game. The best part is if you have a favorite player, let's say it's Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, Saquon Barkley, Aaron Rodgers, no matter who you like, you just simply pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and if you get your picks right, you cash in, went up to 2,000 times your money. Think about that, my friends. It's an incredible opportunity to cash in on the knowledge that you're already sitting on. The flex play option is a total game changer. Even when one of your picks misses, you're always still able to double your money with the flex option in it. And also, Price Picks are their members first, with all withdrawals coming fast, safe, and secure to you, the consumer. So download the Price Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. And of course, it's all courtesy of friends over at Prize Picks, where you can run your game. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Drip Drop. You're going to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days in the classroom, staying focused in back-to-back classes, or simply your day-to-day grind at the job. Hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes into the mix. When you're on top of your hydration, everything works better. Energy, mood, even your skin. But getting enough fluids every day is not always that easy, and that's why you guys need to check out our friends over at Drip Drop. The best part is they got an incredible array of different flavors. They have one that you will enjoy. I always keep a few in my backpack. They were kind enough to send me a sample pack. I've really enjoyed it, and it saved me multiple times, actually, when I've been sitting out on the turf at BYU practice and the like. So take advantage of it right now. Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege to get started today. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you all are doing fantastic out there in Cougar Nation. All right, let's talk about BYU football and Drake Toll's love for the BYU Cougars. Now, here's the deal. I get people all the time asking me, Jake, what is Drake? What does he like so much about BYU? I'll just sum it up by saying this. Drake is enamored with the way the BYU fans are in love with BYU sports, in particular BYU football and BYU basketball. Yes, he caters to BYU. Yes, he understands that BYU fans respond to his content en masse. And trust me, I'm a beneficiary of that myself, because I hosted a daily podcast covering the BYU Cougars. The bigger point is, Drake also is not a guy who's going to sit around and idly just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to pick BYU to finish second in the Big 12 conference out of just because I want clicks. He's got his parameters of why he believes in BYU, and that's why he's got the Cougars projected at 10-2 this fall. Now, I will tease ahead later this week. I plan to do this Thursday. I didn't know that Drake was going to drop it yesterday. I thought it was going to be coming later in the week. He did his predictions for the season for the Big 12. But I have a plan to do a full kind of preview edition on Thursday. That includes the Big 12, BYU game by game, and also I'm going to pick the college football playoff. I'm going to project the 12 teams I think will be playing for the national championship. So stay tuned for that on Thursday. But Drake dropped this yesterday where he projects Texas Tech to finish 11-1. And I got to see if I can get this pulled up here. I forgot to pull it up before we started talking. I'll get it as we go along here. But the bigger point is that BYU is in very, very good company with Drake and what he's projecting for BYU and the Big 12 conference. And the bigger issue is he has got them finishing second behind the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Now, does that mean that this is absolutely going to come to pass? No, this is a projection. I can respect the fact that Drake wants to project what he thinks the Big 12 is going to do. But the best part about this is, I'm going to share this right now, throw it up on our graphics so you guys can see it, is that he projects Texas Tech with all of their transfer portal additions to go 11-1, BYU finishing second at 10-2, and then Utah finishing third at 9-3. Now he also has Kansas State, Arizona State, and Baylor all sitting at 9-3 as well. So essentially a four-way tie for third place. But he does have the Red Raiders and the Cougars matching up in Arlington for the Big 12 title. I think that's actually a very, very strong argument to be made that could be the reality, but it's going to require that, Bear Bachmeier become everything that BYU hopes he can become. I appreciate the fact that Drake's got his conviction. There's always a look of saying, okay, Why is he projecting this? And he explained it pretty strongly yesterday. He believes that BYU's got enough talent to surround a guy like Bear Bachmeier and essentially overcome some of the odds that were, or the deck that's been stacked against them. You lose Jake Retzloff. There's a lot of people think that BYU is going to fall way off the pace. And I can understand that. But the bigger point to be made here is I've been saying it all off season long that, yes, while Jake Retzloff was a loss for the BYU football program, it's absolutely undeniable it's a loss. It's more important, I think, to look at it from the parameters that, yes, while Jake Retzloff exited, Keelan Marion left, Harrison Taggart left, and obviously you lost Darius Lassiter to graduation because he couldn't get an eligibility waiver. You lost some pieces, but the pieces that return, I think, outweigh what BYU lost in many respects. Now, you may argue at wide receiver that Keelan Marion and Darius Lassiter, there's nobody better to replace them. But I think it's JoJo Phillips, Parker Kingston, Cody Hagan. I think the sum total of BYU's wide receiving core, Reggie Frischneck thrown in there, along with Tei Nakua, etc., will make up for the fact that BYU may not have another 1B to the 1A that is Chase Roberts. At linebacker, Harrison Taggart was told in no uncertain terms that his starting position was tenuous at best, and in fact, he may very well have lost it to Siale Acera, and now with Che Bryant Struther making a strong run in training camp, there's an argument to be made that Harrison Taggart would have fallen to third on the depth chart at middle linebacker, and it's not that he's a bad football player. Simply put, the other players on the roster are better than him, and BYU projected as such. That's why I think that Drake's argument here for BYU at 10-2, it's a decently strong one. Now, do I expect it? Man, I keep going back and forth because I want so badly to believe in BYU and their chances to overcome all the adversity they went through this offseason and all the stuff I hear / talk to people about down there in Provo when I'm down at media availability. They have talked so often. They've used the phrase good to great. That is the quote, good to great. They hoped to go from good last year, which is 11-2, finishing 13th in the country, and had a lot of people shouting that they should have gotten more full consideration to play in the Big 12, not the Big 12 title game, the college football playoff after they missed out on the title game. And I understand why those arguments came, but BYU knows that they messed up a major opportunity a season ago, and they came oh so close to playing in that Big 12 title game and potentially punching their ticket to the college football playoff. They want to take that next step. And yes, they have lost some pieces that helped them get near that a season ago, but they believe that they will find the options or the answers they need to get them over the top. I look at this and I think it's a good projection of what the Big 12 is going to entail because if I'm not mistaken, looking at this, he's got 13 teams bowl eligible this season. Colorado at number 13 is 6-6, and Cincinnati is 1 win away from bowl eligibility in these projections from Drake. So what he's also projecting is a very much dog-eat-dog conference with Texas Tech and BYU kind of stepping above the fray and being just a little bit of a cut above the rest. It'd be interesting. I really think the Big 12 this year is going to cannibalize itself. And that can be really bad when it comes to the college football playoff. There's just no denying the fact that it could absolutely hurt BYU in the Big 12 by extension if they were to finish, let's say, like a 9-3, find themselves in a tiebreaker scenario and trying to fight, scratch, and claw their way into a Big 12 title game once again. But I was listening. I say this often. I love the Solid Verbal podcast. It's a great college football podcast. If you're looking for one that looks at things from a national level, they actually were projecting like, hey, I think there's going to be at some point like a multi-team tie for a conference playoff berth or a conference title game berth. And he said like a 5-way playoff going down to like the playoff tie-breaking scenarios way down the list. Well, if there's a conference that's going to have that, in my opinion, it's the Big 12. You have 4 teams here from Drake projected at 9-3. Well, guess what? To sort that out, that's going to have all kinds of tiebreakers in that scenario. With Houston right behind them, West Virginia, he expects a big leap up. There's a lot of teams here. He actually thinks that Iowa State's going to sink back all the way to 11th at 7-5. Bold stuff from Drake. And I look at it and say, I want nothing more than to see BYU playing in Arlington. I can tell you right now, if BYU makes it to the Big 12 title game, yours truly will be down there at AT&T Stadium taking in the sights and sounds. And I know a number of you made the trip last year because it sure looked like BYU was all but there. And then ultimately, messed things up with that loss to Kansas and a subsequent loss to Arizona State. but I would love to see BYU playing for a conference championship. And I'll have more. I've really got to dig down and look at some stats. I've been reading a lot of the Pick Six preview stuff from Brett Ciancia, and I'm so on the cusp of saying, hey, I really think that BYU could be upper tier Big 12 team, even with a freshman quarterback and Bear Bachmeier starting for them. But then there's just that little part of me that says history tells us that starting quarterbacks of that variety, speaking of true freshmen, rarely does it come smoothly for a program like that. But hey, Greg's a believer. Why aren't you? So let me know. It'd be interesting. But once again, Thursday, I'll have my full projections and I will reveal exactly game by game where I think things go for BYU. And we'll have that for you guys on our Thursday edition of the podcast. All right, coming up next, we'll finish up today's edition of the show. And we're going to talk a little bit about the new injury reports that the Big 12 has mandated. And I love that gamesmanship is always a part of what college football has been about for literally decades, essentially since the beginning of the sport back 150 plus years ago. It's always been there. But now that the Big 12 and Power 4 programs are mandating that programs, provide injury reports, the gamesmanship is going to a whole nother level. And I'll explain exactly what is going to happen and how it's going to change the game for BYU and others. And we'll get to that next right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends, a new friend over at OpenPhone. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. I don't have to explain that to you guys if you are in that circumstance. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You probably just moved on. That's why you guys need OpenPhone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. It's the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customer communications. You juggle 2 phones, one personal and one business. Well, I can tell you that I've got multiple family members who have that exact thing. The best part is OpenPhone solves that instantly. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox with no more, hey, who's actually handling this client, etc. The AI agent also handles after-hour calls, answers common questions, also captures leads, so you never miss a customer along the way as well. So to see why over 60,000 businesses are trusting OpenPhone, they're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. It's openphone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. That's OpenPhone, no missed calls, and of course, no missed customers. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. If you have not done so already, please consider subscribing to the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, giving inside intel, practice reports right after practice ends, and the best part about all of it comes to your phone in the form of a text message. You can fire back with thoughts, your own questions, and the like, and you get a 14-day free trial before you charge a single penny, and it's just $5 a month to be a part of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. So join us today. Click the link in the show notes below and be a part of the family that we've got growing on the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, before we go on today's show, let's talk about the Big 12 mandating that injury reports will be coming out for conference games. Now, that means that BYU's first 3 games of the year against Portland State in 11 days' time, Stanford the week after that, and then after a bye week, a road game at East Carolina. You will not have these injury reports until actually the Colorado game on September 27th. The week of those games, and we're going to our first look at it coming up actually tomorrow, because we have Farmageddon going across the pond to Ireland with Iowa State and Kansas State facing off over there in Dublin. Well, tomorrow we'll have our first ever look at player availability reports from the Big 12 Conference and get a feel for how they look. The situation is that you'll have players declared probable, questionable, doubtful, or out in the lead up to the game starting Wednesday. You have Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and there will also be a final report. I believe it's an hour and a half ahead of kickoff. It is all in response, let's acknowledge a spade for a spade, because of the rise of prop bets and gambling on college athletics. And you may like it, you may not. Trust me, I get comments every single time I do a FanDuel ad on this podcast. Hey, Mormons don't bet. Sorry, not Mormons. Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints don't bet. You know what? Let's acknowledge that it's a network-wide initiative. It's a network-wide sponsorship. That's beside the point. But the rise in betting absolutely comes hand in hand with why these player availability reports are coming in vogue and being mandated by these conferences. They are under immense pressure. Texas coach Steve Sarkisian, the former BYU quarterback last year, said that you have gamblers reaching out to the assistant trainers on teams. They're talking like the student assistants, a freshman who just wants to be around the football program, and they're getting hit up by these gamblers saying, hey, so-and-so out this week. Give me I'll make it worth your while. That's the type of crap that's going on behind the scenes. And they're trying to, I think, get away from that by putting out these player availability reports. But there's now going to be what they call the law of unintended consequences with these player availability reports. I am going to channel an interesting note from Kyle Whittingham. Ooh, that's a hiss and a byword on this podcast. The head coach of the University of Utah, the BYU alum himself, who refuses to say those 3 letters and even acknowledge the rivalry for what it is. Yeah. Kyle Whittingham yesterday said that he plans now with player availability reports being mandated by the Big 12 that he is currently not going to put out a depth chart if he can help it. You know what? Welcome to the new age of college football. You mandate one thing, something else is going to change. For years, depth charts were absolutely a part of college football. And here's the deal. Everybody knows, in essence, who the depth chart is. I can probably go through and put together a 2-deep right now for the BYU football program. I would venture a guess that come Monday, when BYU should be putting out a depth chart, we'll see if they follow Kyle Whittingham's lead and don't put one out. But when that one comes out Monday ahead of the Portland State game, I would venture a guess that if you were to give me a 2-deep and I matched it up, what I wrote down today versus what we see on Monday, I'm going to venture a guess I'm at worst 85% correct, if not 90%. You get a feel for being around these players and coaches as to what to expect. And the reading between the lines, I listen to all the media sessions. I'm part of the media sessions. You get a feel for what to expect. If you want to put on a depth chart, so be it. And I also expect this. I can't put it past Kalani Sitake or literally any other coach out there. Why wouldn't you put your entire team on the probable list? Why not? Have some fun with this. This is the Bill Belichick style of coaching. And Bill is in college football. And guess what? The ACC, where he's coaching with North Carolina, has player availability report mandates. And I can guarantee I would expect to see him do the same thing he did with Tom Brady for literally years. I don't think Tom Brady spent more than a week or two not on the injury report. It was either probable or questionable with some sort of ailment for Tom Brady. Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you play the game here? And I don't want to see Kalani Sitake do it, but I also at the same time can't say don't do that, Kalani Sitake, because I get where all these coaches are coming from. They're trying to continue to maintain some semblance of having an advantage over their opponents. Is Portland State going to be able to beat BYU with BYU having a player availability report or a depth chart coming out next week? No, they're a decided 34.5 point underdog per our friends over at FanDuel. There you go. Go to FanDuel.com and get started today. They got prop bets coming up, prop bet day. It's coming up on the 26th. Just a little shameless plug there for those of you who get irked when I do gambling ads. But beyond that, I don't think Portland State is going to be a threat to BYU, even if they know who BYU's starting quarterback is going to be, which we all expect is going to be Bear Bachmeier. Now, it changes a little bit with the likes of Stanford, maybe a road game at East Carolina. But even then, we have talked, and I have talked all offseason long about how soft of a start a BYU season is. The first 6 games look tailor-made for a freshman quarterback to get settled in at the helm of the BYU offense. Well, if that is indeed the case, you shouldn't be fearing anything when it comes to player availability reports, depth charts, and the like. But on the flip side, do I expect Kalani Sitake just to say, you know what, we're good. We're not. No. I fully expect there will continue to be gamesmanship, even from BYU. We all are expecting it from Utah. That's Kyle Whittingham's whole MO. He always seems to have a ace up his sleeve, something he's got to change. You make me have player availability reports, injury reports, for lack of a better term. Great. No depth chart for you guys. Okay, whatever. But I also appreciate the fact that these availability reports will give us an opportunity as a media corps to not have to go ferreting around trying to find out exactly what the status of different players are. Trust me, in our insider group, I get questions all the time about player availability and just asking me, hey, have you heard this? Have you heard that? And you know what? Sometimes I know, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I have a suspicion, sometimes I have an inkling, but I don't have direct knowledge of this. This, in theory, should give us the feel of what to expect. Your top 2 running backs are doubtful. Okay, well, guess what? That's probably going to change the spread when it comes to an individual game. Oh, your quarterback went down. Well, that's absolutely going to change things. And this is going to avoid, at least in theory, like I said, having these gamblers, these degenerates coming after, like I said, the assistant trainers, the 18-year-old freshman who happens to be working around the football program and saying, hey, can you tell me if so-and-so is going to be playing football for X university here? It's a really seedy, shady thing out there in college athletics, but this is in some way hoping to curb it. But as I said, there's a lot of unintended consequences. And we all know that gamesmanship, it reigns supreme in college football. All right, that is going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. As always, truthfully, thank you for all of your support of the podcast. Please continue to subscribe, rate, and review. Share it with your family and friends. If you have not liked the show on YouTube, subscribe to it wherever you get your podcast. Do that today and be a part of it, because you got a big season ahead for BYU football, and beyond that, even BYU basketball as well. It's going to be a pretty crazy next 6, 7, 8 months. But hey, be along for the ride literally every single day right here on your only daily podcast covering the BYU Cougars. Actually, no, it's no longer the only daily podcast. Big ups to my good friend Mitch Harper. Cougar Tracks going daily as well now. So if you want to check that out over on KSL Sports platform, I can't say that we're the only daily podcast any longer. But beyond that, as always, we are your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and thank you for being everydayers right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.